On today's episode, making my industrial rustic dinette table. So if you've watched some of my previous videos, you know I've been leading up to this one. And this was a table that I custom made for a client of mine. Now, in a previous video, I gave you some tips on how to sell your idea to the customer. And I also followed up with doing some design feature tips for the project. Well, here we are. We're going to get into actually building this one. Now, before I get going on the projects, I do want to thank Woodcraft for sponsoring today's video. Woodcraft had some of those specialty unique tools that I absolutely needed to pull this job off. And I'll show those and feature them a little bit more at the end. But after all, Woodcraft's whole purpose is helping you make wood work. I also want to thank the folks over at KenCraft. This is a family-run business that I've been going to for over a decade, and I get all my material from them. But what's really unique is KenCraft makes and sells the legs to this table, and I was only able to purchase them there. If you're interested in that, I'll have a link below in the description. All right, without further ado, let's cue that dance music. I'm beginning with the walnut that I picked up from KenCraft. Now, this walnut here was rough sawn, so I was just working on getting a semi-flat surface, something that will go through my surface planer. Now, you'll notice that I just primarily wanted these outer edges here to be flat. This is going to be the bottom side that I'm going to place down in the surface planer. And carefully I'm feeding the boards through the surface planer, just taking a little bit at a time. Once I get this section flat, I'll flip it over and do the other side. Okay, now that the boards are flat, I need a straight edge on them because the edges are not flat or square. And I'm going to do this with my Festool track saw. Now the Festool track saw, that's available at Woodcraft stores if you're interested in getting one. I also have a link in the description below. Now once I use the track saw, I could either use that again to square up the other edge, or I can actually run it through my table saw. Alright, now here comes the tricky part for me. Because this table is supposed to have a rustic look, and I really can't go with one giant slab on this, I'm now taking a look at the boards and trying to find the best interesting grain pattern and maybe some interesting features to match up on this tabletop. And well, at the end of the day, I just kind of gave up with what I had. And thought it looked pretty good until I came back in the next morning. I re-looked at it and once again made some changes on the layout of the boards. Now I am doing a separate video on this and I explain in detail what it was that was bothering me and why I selected what I did. So look for that in a small upcoming video. So now that I've laid out the boards the way I wanted, I made the marks where the waist is going to be. So now I'm cutting the boards to length, and I'm just using my regular old Milwaukee circular saw. Now, although my track saw did a pretty good job of getting the boards straight and flat, I still always like to push it through the joiner to make sure that they truly are flat when I place the boards next to each other. Now that the planks are all squared and flat, I could probably just go ahead and glue them together. Today's modern glue is fantastic. I probably wouldn't have had any issues with it, but I did want to make sure that I had a little bit of extra strength in there, so I'm putting a 1/2 inch slot or groove into the edges, and then I'm going to make a spline that will fit in between it. Essentially, they'll kind of be like tongue and groove boards when it's done. The splines were nothing more than some 1/2 inch poplar that I ripped down on the table saw. To make sure that the splines actually went into the grooves with a little bit of ease, I just chamfered the edges slightly on the splines, and I did that real quick with just a spoke shave. Then it's on to the process of gluing it all up. Now, I never try to clamp all my boards at one time. I like to glue 2 at a time. In this case, I had 5 planks, so I did 2, and then I did another one on it, so there'd be 3. And then I glued up the last 2, and then I merged those all together, attaching 3 planks to the 2 planks and all 5 planks. Did you get all that? Okay, now that the planks are all glued up, now the clamps, it needs to be flattened again, because even though you took all that time, you're still going to get a little bit that's going to be out when you glue them together. And you've seen me flatten boards before using my winding sticks and electric surface planer, but I tried a different method this time, and I'm going to again do a separate video on that to explain how that process went. So with the board flat, I still now need to get it smooth, so I'm using a series of different hand planes, card scrapers, etc. on this to get it to the surface that I want. In that other video that I show you how I do my other flattening process, I'll explain the use of each of these hand planes and the results that I got from them. Okay, so if you saw my video on a tip for furniture design, I made a prototype for the customer, and the customer said in the end that they wanted it 1 inch longer on each end and 1 inch wider on the edges. So going off of my template here, I just set my compass to 1 inch wider and trace the profile. Then using the jigsaw, I rough cut the shape out. So to simulate like a live edge on this piece, I've got this great tool from Arbortech called the Turbo Plane. Man, this is fantastic. It can remove stuff really fast, a lot, or you can work it very soft and do some delicate stuff. And probably in an upcoming video, I will show you my method for doing the simulated live edge technique with this tool. Now, although they wanted the top to be rustic, I didn't want any food or crumbs falling into the knots on it. So I used a little bit of epoxy to fill that in. And then to remove a lot of that epoxy, I just simply used a card scraper to work it down flat. From there, I just moved on to sanding, going through my various grits of different sandpaper. And I did a video on how to maximize and simplify your sanding time. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a video down below in the description. So I'm painting these legs here that I was able to pick up over there at Ken Craft. Now they're aluminum, so I painted them black so it looked like that old cast iron. Very cool. However, in between the legs, I need to have a stretcher, so I'm going to build that next. So making the rail, I first cross-cut it and then rip it down to size on the table saw. Now the top pieces are essentially going to form to make it look like an I-beam, and so I just want to put a small chamfer on the outside edges, and I'm just doing that with my Wood River number 4.5 hand plane. And here's the procedure for gluing up this I-beam. On the bottom side, no one's really going to see it, so I'm going to drill some holes through it and use screws. Add a little glue, and then some clamps, hold it in place, and then I'll put the actual screws in it. Now for the top side, I didn't want to be able to see any screws. I didn't even want to be able to see any nails, so I drilled some holes, and I'm going to use some dowel pins in here. So I put in some dowel pin center points, and then I'm able to place the top board on it, line it up for the center, and then press down. And what that's going to do is going to leave some indentation marks on the bottom side of that top piece. From there, I'll drill some holes only about halfway through the board, and then I can place the dowel pins in and glue it all up. Now on the legs from KenCraft there is a large center hole that I can put a large lag screw in, but I was still worried about it being able to rotate if someone put their legs on it, so I'm drilling a smaller hole just below it where I'll put a small single screw in. I've already pre-drilled a hole on the end of the rail, and it's just a matter of me placing the legs there, using the lag bolt and a washer, and of course a ratchet to tighten it all up together. Okay, so now I'll just place in that small little screw just below that there. Again, this keeps the rail from possibly twisting or moving. And of course you can see I scratched the paint on the fender washer and bolt a little bit, so just a little bit of touch-up paint and that makes it go away. Now for the top, I'm applying a crystal lac amber sanding sealer on it, which I think really brings out the beauty of the walnut here. And then after that, I'm going to use my Urlax spray gun, and I'm going to put 5 coats of the crystal lac top coat on it. This will make it very heavy duty for any kind of wear or extreme temperatures that might be placed on the surface. And now it's a matter of just placing the top onto the bottom section of this table. And of course then the table is held into place with some lag screws that are attached from the bottom. And there it is, all finished. The rustic, industrial looking table. Okay, and that is how I built my industrial rustic dinette table. Now, I said at the beginning of the video I was going to talk about a few featured tools that I thought were pretty vital in making this table come out smooth. And the first one is by Arbortech. This is the turbo plane from them, and this is different from the chainsaw wheels that you see. This actually has 3 blades on it. And this works so good. I can take off a massive amount of wood really, really fast. And at the same rate, because it's curved on the edge here, I can do some really light, delicate work. I'm going to use this more in the future on different projects, but I definitely think if you're into wanting to make some live edged tables, this is the ideal tool to have. I do want to make one point though. That's the Arbortech Turbo Planer. It's just the disc. It does not come with the angle grinder. That is sold separately. All right, the second feature tool that I want to talk about is one that people ask me all the time. And they're like, Chad, what is the spray gun that you use for your top coats? And this is the X 5500 paint gun. Now, what's unique about this paint gun is it puts on an incredibly smooth finish. And the reason for that is unlike a spray gun that has a compressor, this has its own pump that always puts out the same amount of air pressure. It's almost like a vacuum that's working in reverse. This allows me to always keep the air pressure at the same constant temperature and flow, so I have a really nice finish. The other great thing about it is this spray gun is an HVLP. In other words, I'm getting more of the material onto my project and not atomized into the air. I don't have that dust cloud. Absolutely a great spray gun, worth every penny. My last featured tool is a much more economical one, and that's card scrapers. I've been using card scrapers for so long, I can't live without them. These are fantastic for getting small nicks and dings out of the wood, or as you saw where I was taking off that epoxy. You try doing that with a sandpaper and you're just going to clog up the paper in no time. This did excellent on it. I highly recommend everyone should have card scrapers. I also love to recommend books to my viewers. And two books that I recommend are Making Rustic Furniture and The Rustic Furniture Companion, both by Daniel Mack. These books are great for giving you a whole bunch of ideas and showing you techniques to build unique furniture. Now keep in mind there are no plans in them because you are working with the shape that nature gives to you, and every piece is different. But these books really help get the imagination going. And speaking of books, I just recently finished my easy-to-read 15-page book on 6 rules for better furniture design. I'll have that link below. You can get it right off of my website. I definitely think it'll help you be creative and build better furniture. And as always, if you have any questions on a project you're working on in your shop, well, feel free to write me at woodshopintime@gmail.com. After all, my whole goal is to make you a better woodworker. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep on dancing.